Welcome to the Global Marketing Show, the podcast for all things international business. I'm your host, Wendy Pease, president of Rapport International and a translation expert. Come along with me today as we talk to an expert in the global marketing world about facing their biggest fears, hearing about mistakes they made or saw, discussing best practices, and sharing fun travel, language, and culture stories. Hi, thanks for joining the Global Marketing Show podcast. Today, we've got a really interesting person. But before we get into that, I want you to tell me what baseball, shipping, and leadership all have in common. Well, you're going to learn because today we have Trent Clark here today, who has founded multiple businesses. He's a three-time Major League Baseball World Series coach. He has the rings to prove it, and he's an all-around great guy. I have enjoyed getting to know him so much. So welcome, Trent.
Wow, thanks, Wendy. Thanks for having me. Super excited about sitting down with you today. Thanks.
Yeah. So you are the answer to the question of what does baseball, shipping, and leadership have to do together?
Yeah, right. I think, if you could put all those together in one sentence, it'd be like, oh, it's that guy, right? That guy. Right.
Yeah. And as I was reading your profile about different things, I was exhausted just looking at it. You've got 5 kids, you've done business on 4 continents, you've started 11 companies, you're an active volunteer, and you're really active in your church too. So where do you get the energy? What's the secret sauce?
Yeah, I work out a lot, right? I don't drink, so I save that cost, and I also save that extra time of recovery, right? So I don't know. We are busy and we're goers and doers, and I like it that way. I mean, and I got into that mode probably at a young age, always playing and doing all that thing. And I just don't think I know how to do it the other way, right? Where you just stop. And I think that's probably my knock. Your strength can also be your weakness, right? Where it's like, hey, do you ever just sit and relax? I'm like, well, let's go do something. I was like, hey, let's just sit at the cabin and just look out, and I'm like, 10 minutes. All right, that's what I got for that, right?
Okay, but it's also always very productive work too, then.
Well, I hope so. Certainly trying to make a difference. I think that's the kind of key thing for me is I've been given a lot. I've been really blessed, and so I want to give back. And so the opportunity to do that certainly presents itself sometimes, and so I'm thankful I get to do that. Hey, I think I have another answer, by the way, to your question.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
George Steinbrenner. George Steinbrenner, the owner of the Yankees, a pretty good leader, and owned the Yankees for a long time. He started in shipping. That was his family business. Yes. Yeah. So I felt like, hey, you know what? They're not going to say Trent Clark. They're going to say George Steinbrenner. Yeah.
Well, you'll always be the person I know for baseball.
Oh, that's cool. All right. Yeah. Who's that George Steinbrenner guy anyway? That guy.
Well, I got to know, did you put the ship in leadershipity because of your shipping background?
Right. Yeah. So leadership, right? And everyone thinks about that. Maybe I should have highlighted the ship, right? Because of my background in shipping oil and transportation and all sorts of things. But we do really focus on the itty, right? Like all those things that we want in leadership, right? We want accountability. We want integrity. We want diversity. We want unity. We want all these things in our leadership. And of course, as leaders, we're good at some of those things and like everything. We're not good at everything. So sometimes we miss on some of those. But, for us as employers, and we want our leaders to have all those things, right? Like, you'll be good at all of them, right? And they're like, well, I'll try. That's good, right? They will.
So what are you best at? You've got accountability, diversity. What were some of the other itties?
Oh, yeah. Oh, there's so many, right? Accountability, responsibility. We talked about unity, diversity. But on the bottom of my email signature is a ton of them too. Because I always like to ask people like, hey, what's that most important one to you? Right? Like what really comes off as a a super important, boy, if I had something I could do, or if I had one thing that I'd really want from people, is it clarity? Is it humility? Is it dependability? Is it adaptability right now? Is it, in our firm, we want creativity. Oh, my firm, we're about productivity. And, then you get the groups of like, what, we're generosity. We give back all the time. And then you've got the integrities, like we're everything we say we do. I love accountability. I feel like it's a 4-letter word now, right? But I love it. Like, and I feel like, there was so much growing up as an athlete. Like, I tell a lot of parents who ask me, who want their, children to be, superstar athletes and play in pro sports and all that. First of all, I tell them careful what they wish for.
Yeah.
Second, that accountability, I tell them to get their children in individual sport at a pretty young age. Can they do wrestling or gymnastics or swimming often? Even though you play on a team, it's an individual sport a lot of times. Track and field and running, like we're tennis, right? Like you just have these sports where I love team sports. I'm a team sport person, but probably a lot of my lessons in learning and leadership and that accountability and self-discipline came from individual sports, because we got that aspect where if we lost in football but I scored 3 touchdowns, I kind of did my job, but hey, it's the defense, or it's this, or we can blame or make excuse. Boy, in the individual sports, it's like, oh, I lost 6-1, 6-1, and that's somebody else's. Well, I don't know who else to blame except me, because I'm the only one out there, right? So
if you start them young in an individual sport, they learn ownership of winning and losing.
Exactly. Responsibility. Why did I win? Because I did the practice. I did the work. I was accountable to what the coach asked me to do. You really start working on those iddies, right? That dependability and that humility, right? When you win, learn how to win with poise and humility, and also how to lose with sportsmanship. Like, hey, I tried hard, but I wasn't the best today. And boy, when I think about like wrestling, like what a hard one, right? Because like physically you kind of get beat up, right? Like, oh, I got pinned in 12 seconds. Like, wow. Like I was not good today. Right? like that happened fast, or that person was really well prepared and really, and now it's learning like, boy, I wasn't great, but I wonder what he's doing, because he was great today, and maybe I need to train like him, or how prepared he was to be ready to go, and all those things. So I think there's just a lot of learnings and self-responsibility from those individual sports, even though you still can play, tennis on a team, and you can swim on a team and run track with the team, and it all counts. As a track person, it's you and the clock, right? Like I don't get to have any competitors actually, because really at the end of the day, it's how well did I do against it? And boy, when you talk about preparation and all that, like, boy, there's nowhere else to turn for excuse. I'll tell you, it always comes back to me.
So it's really interesting. We my mom did a Fulbright scholarship. I'm staying on topic here, even though it seems like we're veering very far. And she worked with a graduate student over there that came over here to visit us. And we loved touring him around. But something that was really weird for him was to go to my son's baseball game. I mean, he's looking at the big baseball diamonds. There are 4 of them, right in that area in town. All the families that are out watching their kids. And he's saying, in China, we don't do this. You've got your one child and they're in school from like 9 to 5, and then they got homework from 5 to 11. And so the whole sporting concept of the importance, and you do leadership training around the world. So I'm kind of curious about, where we can take sports and use it into an analogy in the U.S. for leadership. What do you see globally with the differences there?
Yeah, there are cultural differences, right? And we really have to consider those things. What probably one of the universal ones is music, right? So I love to use the orchestra analogy for leadership, right? We're going to come all together and the orchestra is going to play. And Wendy, I expect you to be so good with your instrument. You know, like if you're a flute player or you're a drummer or you're in percussion, you know, like I expect you to be great, but you also have to follow, right? We only make great music if we do together. Sometimes there's that solo, and Wendy's so good, we're going to give her a solo in the next show, and you have that part. But the majority is working with everybody else, because if we all just say, hey, I'll play my instrument, Wendy, you play yours, and Tom will play his, and Diane will play his, and Ying will play his, and we all just go across. This is going to sound awful, right? Like there's no unity, there's no togetherness, and we really have to follow that conductor. And so all of a sudden that leadership becomes, hey, how does that conductor lead everybody in and bring everybody along, and everyone knows their role and how to do their job, so this music is so beautiful and so well played. And so I think music's kind of an international bridge for a lot of things, but you really do have to find out what's important to your culture. You know, fortunately for me, I go to the East, and, you know, Japan loves baseball, right? So try to go to those places. Everyone, I don't think I've ever been on a continent where there really wasn't a sport. And really worldwide, probably the most sport I talk about, of course, is football or soccer. Right.
Soccer. I was going to say, which football? I don't think it's
right. It's not our football, right? It's football. It's football.
Okay.
And they are worldwide. I mean, it seems like it feels like every country, it's still important. You know, it's on their stage. And if there's a sport, soccer is always kind of a top three, even in some of the, you know, third world. I mean, it doesn't cost a lot.
Yeah.
Been down to Ecuador. They love their team. They're very nationalistic about the Ecuadorian team. And I was down there the year of the World Cup in Brazil, and they were in, right? So, I mean, it was just amazing to see the national pride behind the team. A lot of fun.
So what was your first exposure to another culture or country?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, so I think my first exposure was Canada, of course. Like, I'm a Michigan kid. And so that first exposure for me was all about hockey and playing sports across the border, and going into another country where I can remember, like, we would go there in vans, and, you know, they would take all the kids and search our car. They would search our vehicle like, oh, these kids are coming to play hockey. Like, we're like 12, right? And you know, it was very interesting. You gotta go out and about, eh? And, you know, and everyone, wow, they don't really talk like I talk, right? And so it was fun. And we went into the French Canada and listened to, you know, a very different language. And I can remember my first time in Montreal, where I really felt like this is really different than North America, right? Like, you don't drive down the street and see, hey, you're heading south. It's sewer, right? Like, I mean, everything is in French. You don't have anything. So you're kind of going, I should have listened in class more. I don't know how I'm going to eat, right? Like, so can I order that? And you start pointing to pictures, right? So, you know, that's part of that. What I love about that for kids is, like, adaptability. You're learning right now, hey, how do I adapt in that culture? And families help you, and it's a fun experience. I mean, to get out there and travel, and I think that's what's so cool about the world, is, like, the world has just shrunk. It's become so much smaller now. Even though it's such a big place, it's I mean, where can't we go on a plane in 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're in a whole nother world. It's incredible.
It really is. So baseball took you to a lot of places international too.
Yeah, it really did. And yeah, I mean, even as soon as I got into playing and collegiately and things like that, I can remember playing in Mexico. And I thought this was probably my greatest, it's one of the greatest things I ever received from sport, is that fortunately I was pretty decent. And I got to see a lot of the world on someone else's dime, because you and I know how expensive it can be to, like, hey, let's just go to the south of France for 2 weeks, right? And, like,
especially when you have 5 kids.
yeah, right. Like, I'm like, hey, kids, you better get good at something. So, it's so true. It's so true. It's not cheap to see the world, but it is so invigorating. It's so educational. And I tell you, from being an American, I really, you have a whole new appreciation for our country, and for when I hear people get down on America, and we're going through some tough times right now, and I really appreciate that. We have a lot of different opinions, but I tell anybody, hey, thicken up your passport. This is still the place in the world that, everyone will say, hey, listen, we will sacrifice a lot. As many immigrants have sacrificed every personal asset they own to leave it behind and come for the opportunity here.
Yeah.
Like, you don't hear about that. Like, oh, have you ever heard of an American going, I'm defecting to Poland? Like, I don't
for the opportunity, right?
Yeah,
like,
what?
True.
Like, I don't hear that, but everywhere in the world I hear that. So for Americans, I'm like, wow, if you're a little down on it, I really encourage you to thicken up your passport and find out, because people will give up and sacrifice a great deal to have this opportunity that we provide, and we're blessed, and it's hard to even encompass how great that blessing is. Just being here every day.
I had a heel on a boot that had to get fixed, and so I took it over yesterday to the cobbler in the town over, and he was very proud of his story. He moved here 25 years ago and bought a cobbler store. He had years, 4 or 5 years of experience in Russia, and now he's been there. He's part of the community. He knows everybody. And so he's lived that American dream, and it's out there for people to capture.
It is. And I love that. I love that what you just said right there. Like he engulfed in the community, and he knows a part, and he knows people in the community. And more importantly to me is that they know him.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is the real value of community. And I can remember everyone saying, oh, pro baseball, boy, it's all who you know. And I'm like, well, it's really who knows you. Do they know you to be like, I know Wendy Peace as a person of integrity who does great work on this international market and just all this translation work. And this is the person you need to call. And when you have people telling others about you, I know this person. So they go, wow, I want to know Wendy Peace because of what Trent said. like now people know you. Like if I said, hey, you should call Wendy Peace. Oh, well, who's that? I don't know. Like they don't know you yet, but once they get to know you and they find out that you have all those itties, dependability, responsibility, you take all those things so serious in your business and all your people and your organization, they find that and they go, wow, I'm so glad that I know Wendy Peace. And instantly they want to tell others about you.
Which is so interesting because in the United States, we're known as very time and efficiency oriented. And so we can jump on a call and get right into business and not worry about building the relationship. Yet that relationship is what is going to drive your success.
Sure.
So do you see a difference of that with your work in the United States versus, the kinds of relationships you've built internationally?
Yeah, I am super fortunate to have these great relationships worldwide. And one of those reasons is because I'm a member of the Entrepreneur Organization. Last year, there was 13,000 members in that organization worldwide. I can get on my phone app and walk in, land in Oslo, and I can look up 10 members I could give a call to right now. They'd come down to my hotel and grab dinner. I'd learn everything about the country, in a couple hours, and it might cost me $100 to buy a dinner. It'd be great. It'd be the best.
So tell me about
relationship, though.
Tell me about some of the people that you've met. I want to hear the stories.
I've met some great.
Who made a real impression on you?
I've had so many good impressions. I've had people just, they've shuttled me around the world. I've never, I travel alone often, but I never feel alone because these people come into my life and they say, oh, this is our event and we're so glad you're here to speak. And let us show you everything. They want to show off their country. And it's what you said again, though. Right now, we're right into building relationships by phone and the setup and the Zoom calls before we ever get there. And just like you and I, like before we ever actually get to the meeting, we're already friends, right? Like we have a relationship. We've got to know one another's. We know we have families and we have different things in our lives, right? And so it's so pertinent. Last year I spoke in Guatemala City. Mm-hmm. Of course, in America, that is right now a warning. Like, hey, this country's been on the warning. They've now come off that dangerous country, the red label for their
Yeah.
international travel. They've come off that because they've worked really diligently with our government to shore some things up. And it's great. And it's just the most beautiful country. And the entrepreneur member there was just an absolute like treasure. It was just, I saw the country like I'd never seen and I would never get. Like I really kind of saw all the best things probably, right? Because it's pride and we want to see that. But just
I've heard the
going in,
countryside is beautiful there.
it's just unbelievable. And he actually lived in the countryside. So I mean, we would walk out and have coffee in the morning at his home, and you're looking over these massive valleys and just seeing all the industry, right? Like bananas, coffee, all these things are going on in these beautiful, rich fields. And I'm like, wow. Like, we have the Colorado Rockies in America, but we don't have this kind of look, to these mountainside that's just producing all these products. It's incredible. And so I've just been so fortunate. It's been awesome.
So everybody has some fears about doing international work. Think about that for a minute and what fears you might have had or you had to confront.
Yeah, I really had to confront, my first time in the Dominican Republic in baseball, right? It's professional baseball. This is probably my first third world country, right? Like, I don't know what that means, right? I don't know what third world means, but this is what it means. Like, it's third world. And, I land in Santo Domingo, and it could look like any city in America, right? Like there's tall buildings, you've got an airport, and I'm like, well, drive 10 miles out of town, things are getting very different, right? Like it is, metal sidings, put up against each other, grass hut tops, 4 to 6 people living in a 12 by 10 foot space, dirt floors. I mean, wow. You really recognize that it's different, right? But what I love about humanity is not unhappy, not feeling like, hey, I'm envious because I don't have something, blessed and still for the things that they have been given, and there's still a foundation there that I just love. And I think the people are smiling and they're fun and they're just living it up and they're living life, and it's amazing. But I tell you, my first time, I was scared, like not that good at Spanish. Again, really should have listened in school. And, I'm learning and I'm good enough to order food. I'm good enough to get my driver lost, But it was, again, I was a little sheltered. Like I had some people guiding me. So that was really advantageous. But I can remember I was about, let's see here. It was not long. It was a really big paradigm shift for me traveling internationally when I was down in South America, and it was about 2003, 2004. And I was talking with a small group and these really high-powered women in this community, just business owners, and they were really sharp and really well-educated. And one person in the group hadn't traveled a lot as many of the others. And she said, "Oh, America, so dangerous. I saw those planes go into the buildings. I would never go to New York." And I was like, "Ooh, wow." Like, what a shift in paradigm. Like, I'm worried about your country. There's a lot of drugs in your country. I don't know. I'm not coming down here for Coke. So I don't know, but I'm like nervous about like all the things you hear about, drug cartel in South America, and scared. And, and I'm thinking, hey, she's scared of America, gun control, planes going into buildings. This is what's going on there. Why would I ever visit there? That's dangerous. And I realized, boy, we all have fears, right? We all get scared. And so that really gave me a paradigm shift that, wow, we really do see things and we don't really know what the truth is, but it's easy to understand that and be fearful of things that we don't know. And I think that's part of the international, is that it's what we don't know. We feel a lot better about what we know. And there's so, and I think it's probably what what really helped me in travel was in sports. You got to get pretty good at being uncomfortable. And I've never gone and explored in a country, and I've had a couple incidences were a little shaky, but I've never looked back and gone, I'm so sorry that we went and did that in Indonesia, or like it was an experience, and even if it didn't
Okay,
go
wait,
great,
wait. Those shaky experiences, you got to come
yeah.
up with one and give me an example.
Yeah,
This is what I'm trying to
yeah.
pull out right
I've had a couple moments, right, where I was like,
Oh, tell me about
I don't
one.
really know where I'm at, right? And so, yeah, it's been. I was in the East. I was in, and Singapore, right? Like this is one of the most safest countries in the world, and I felt like I was a lawbreaker because I think I trafficked gum into the country, right? Like so. I didn't chew it while I was there, so I just want to go
Good.
on saying I was legal. Okay, but
Right,
I
for
remember
listeners who don't know that it's illegal to chew gum in Singapore, and their consequences are pretty severe. So
very
you
severe.
brought it in, you smuggled it in, but you
Yeah, I
didn't chew,
smuggled it, but I didn't. Yeah,
you're not
and
that
I didn't
risky.
sell it. I wasn't selling
Selling
Wrigley's.
it, okay. It was just in your pocket for going home,
Yes,
huh?
yeah. I just had it in my bag. So, yeah. So that's it, and they're very serious. It's a very clean country. But language barrier. Their English is still strong, but I, workout guy, like I said. And one evening, I went out right after dinner and went for a run.
Mhm.
And I'm following my GPS, and I'm kind of mapped out, and I messed up and I got lost, and now I my signal's no longer on my phone. And I'm like, ooh, no idea where I'm at. I'm in workout gear, I'm sweaty, it's dark now, and
Yeah.
I can't hail a cab, didn't bring a wallet, and this is now pre this is like pre-Google Pay, Apple Pay, any kind of electronic digital swipe. So I don't have a credit card. I don't have cash. I don't have their money for sure. And I'm like, oh man, you realize all of a sudden, like, this is not great. And so I'm moving through looking. And so what I did was I looked for lights. Right, I start looking for the cloud, thinking, "Hey, where's a shopping mall? Where's something like that where I could go to a grocery store?" So I'm jogging and it's dark, and I'm thinking like, oh, and about a mile and a half, I see like I got to go there because I see like the sky's lit. There's got to be something going on there. And the first one I went to, it was like a sale thing, and they had the lights going in the sky. It was nothing. It was one store, and I was like, "Oh no!" Like, I'm thinking. I went away from my hotel, right? I'm like, "Oh!" So I see it. I take off again, and I see
How long
another
have you been
area.
running at this point?
Yeah, well, first of all, I was already out like an hour and 15 minutes when I realized I'm in the wrong spot. That's when I catch myself like I should have been back. I should have been
Right.
back.
Okay.
Right now I realize like, oh, wait a minute, where am I at? What? And so, so I see these lights, and so I go, and fortunately for me, it was kind of a mall, but there's a grocery store, and I go into the grocery store, and they're like, and someone can speak English, so I'm like, hey, how would I get to the Marriott? Right? Like, hey, how would I do that? And this woman was so nice, like she called a cab for me, and she told the cab in her language, like that I would pay at the hotel, like I would pay there because he doesn't have his money, but he has money at the hotel. So, so that's how I did it. But, and I was really thankful that I was in Singapore, right? Because,
Yeah.
kind of coming back to our country, same kind of situation. I was in New Orleans speaking, and I got caught. I was trying to get back to Chicago. It was like December, big Chicago storm, and they shut all the airports down.
Oh.
Well, so all of a sudden it's every day, like 2-3 days in a row. I'm like, all airports closed, call tomorrow, American Airlines. I'm like, wow. So I'm like, can I stay another night at the Marriott? So I go out really early in the morning because I called for the flight. It's like, 5 a.m. and no chance. So I'm like, well, I'm up. I'm going to go running. So I go running out through the French Quarter, and it's on a Friday morning. I'm trying to get home, but not going to get home this day. So I take off for the run, and I start off the streets of the French Quarter, right?
Yeah.
And so the day comes out and I get back to the hotel, I'm having breakfast, and the USA Today is the weekend edition, and I read this, and it's like, New Orleans, murder capital. People are getting picked off these streets right off the French Quarter. I'm like, wait, where I went running today? It's like, oh my goodness. Like, I'm glad it wasn't 10 at night. Like, I'm just thinking, like, oh my goodness. Like, I don't know. Sometimes you don't know where you're at, you know, and you're thinking like, hey, it feels pretty safe. And we've been in a lot of neighborhoods, you know, where, hey, it's great here, but 2 blocks. Yeah. It gets not great fast.
Well, that's right? Down in the French Quarter. You're on Bourbon Street or the couple, but you don't go a couple off there. That's
that was
at 10 midnight. Ooh, it's danger. Yeah.
Yep. That was a learning experience that I was fortunate that, hey, I was daylight. Well, sort of. It was morning, but you know, who's moving at 5:30 in the morning around, right? So like, fortunately for me, it was okay. But lesson learned. So there's, you know, a couple things out there in the world that get a little scares, but usually turns out all right.
Yeah. So you talked about back at the Dominican Republic when you got there and you're driving in and you're looking at these, you know, lean-to metal towns and realizing that you don't speak the language. Talk to me about how you've dealt with language on your international travels.
Yeah, I mean, so before there was Google Translator, right? Before that, we've had, you know, it was tough. It was very important on the setup of how you did things. And so oftentimes I was very coordinated about who was going to be picking me up at what time. And I always kind of had a driver that could navigate enough language with me and where we had to go. Now, the other side of this is that we always have people, you know, on the ground who are, you know, usually U.S. educated and running their company, you know, in another country. So their English is very good. So I've always been very thoughtful and prepared in having someone with me. And so I never felt too bad. But I also love to go. I took my driver like in the Dominican, and I was like, hey, you're so great to me. I want to take you to lunch and buy you whatever you want. And he was like, oh, really? And he said, I'm like, whatever, like, let's go. And he's like, McDonald's. I'm like, really? And he was like, yeah, I want McDonald's. You know, and you're thinking like in a third world country, like McDonald's, like, hey, a $5 double quarter pounder is like, that's like a you know, this isn't like a quick fast meal here. This is kind of a nice meal there, right? And I was so impressed with McDonald's because, you know, you go into you know, San Pedro, Dominican Republic, and I got the exact quarter pounder with cheese I get in, you know, Grand Rapids or Chicago or Austin, you know, wherever I'm at. So it was great, and he was so thankful. Like, I was like, yeah, all right, it cost me like $21. Like,
I had the same experience in China when we went over to visit my mom's graduate student, where you've never had McDonald's. So we took him into McDonald's and let him get whatever he wanted.
Yeah. Isn't that good? So I'll tell you my Chinese story on language. That was a real struggle. Like our family, you know, just to add to the chaos, right? We had a Chinese student from just outside of Beijing stay with us while he was going to high school. A few years back. So we had this international student and helped him and really, really enjoyed it. A lot of fun. And so I went to speak in Shanghai, and his father had some business in Shanghai and came to meet me. I hadn't met his parents before. He came to the country, and his parents didn't come. And so he gets settled in. The kid's great. I love the kid. And so his dad's going to meet me for dinner. His dad does not speak like 4 words of English.
Yeah.
And I speak 4 words of Chinese, right? So we pick out this restaurant, and my whole search for the restaurant was, you have good Wi-Fi, right? So like, I get there, I get on my phone, and we go to Google Translator, and we talk all night into our phones, and it does the translator.
That's fantastic. That
And
is
yeah,
a really good use for the Google Translator, because you've got no liability. It doesn't have
oh
to be
yeah,
exactly perfect, but
yeah,
it can
we were
facilitate the
close.
conversation.
Two
Yeah.
2.5 hour dinner,
Did you
like,
really?
yeah, I just had a ball and got to know him, and then he came over for his son's graduation. We took him on, and his English had been like majorly improved. I don't know if he started using Google Translator to learn, because he went from 4 to like 400 words. Like, I mean, significant, right?
Yeah.
In just a
Yeah.
few years. Now, part of that might be because his son comes back every summer from America going, "Hey, Dad, yum, 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 I better learn what he's saying." I don't know. Maybe that's it. But he was really much improved, and so
I've
it
been
was a bunch of fun.
surprised at the number of people internationally who have learned English by watching American TV, Hollywood movies.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
and the American players would do the same thing. They would go to Mexico or Dominican or Venezuela for the winter leagues, and that's how they would learn Spanish. They'd watch the Spanish
Oh,
TV. That's
yeah.
exactly how, and the players would help them too and laugh at them a lot. And
Yeah.
so it was. It just feels. It's so funny as a language. It feels, every language feels fast when you're in
Yes.
their country. Like, wow, does everybody talk this fast? Like,
Fast.
and I'm thinking, wow, people have to keep up with my English, right? And they're going,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, it's rapid fire. I'm never going to understand this English. So um, it
I think
just,
that's, and so do you change your speaking when you're talking to people who aren't
so
English native speakers?
yeah, so I do really have to consider the fact, like, the big thing when I speak internationally is there's translators, right?
Oh, well, they would be interpreters because they're
Yeah,
helping with
yeah, I'm
spoken
sorry.
language.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, they're interpreters,
translators
right?
written, interpreter spoken.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we have an interpreter who comes up on the stage, either side to me, and then they go, "Hey, do you want Spanish, Japanese, Chinese?" And then so now I'm like, I really have to think about slowing down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and that is not my MO. I'm like, let's go. I'm so energetic and passionate that it's
So
astounding.
we give advice to speakers when they're going to speak with interpreters on how to be successful. So what have you learned, or what have you trained, are people giving suggestions for you?
Yes. So they've given me my advices have been long pauses. Make
Uh-huh.
sure I got good pauses. Try not to like break the information down into very um, small parts, very digestible parts, and take breaks. Take more breaks. So we usually don't go in the international environment, we usually go 45 to 50 minutes on and take the break. Where in America, I'm typically going 2 hours, 2:15 or something like that, 1:45 to 2:15 before a break. So if we do like a half day session, we may only do one break, maybe two, and there it's on the hour. Like we get very thoughtful to get people a break, get the headsets off, and also being able to be interactive, I think, is really important. Bringing I have a lot of work. I want people to dig into the information and leave with something tangible in their hand that says, hey, I'm gonna change some things about the way, and now I've got a little bit of a playbook on how I might do that. So I like to give some exercises. So as long as we're prepared, we have that the worksheets in Japanese and Chinese and Spanish, and we're prepared for it, which I think is really more engaging. And I think we have to be thoughtful to that. I
Mm-hmm.
also think there's a good way when you're speaking internationally to get folks together speaking in a tongue they understand, that they're clearly serviceable. I don't want to say fluent, but serviceable, right? And they can
Mm-hmm.
sit at a table and do some interactive work too, where they talk to people from different countries, different backgrounds, even different areas of the country, right? Because when you look at China and America, these countries are gigantic. So you have very different pockets of cultures and dialects. So it's fun to get people in and intermingling. And I think it's back to what you said, Wendy. It's back to building relation. So I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic to hear. And so you mentioned that you also get your worksheets translated so people can read them and really participate.
For
I'm
sure.
so happy to hear that. How did you go about getting them translated?
Well, originally I had like my VAs do it. I have virtual assistants out of the Philippines that work for me, and they do a lot of different work. I kind of started as an executive assistant, but they are very thorough and well prepared. So they give me a lot of international, and they're great. Like their international exposure's great because they represent and work for companies all over the world. So if I say, oh, hey, listen, I'm going to go into Norway with this event, and they go, oh, good. We have two companies in Norway. And I'm going to walk down the hall and talk to our four assets that are supporting that, a couple of Norwegian companies, and talk about the translation work that we might have to do there. And so it's like, oh, great. Like, that's awesome, right?
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
we try to get that. And then I usually try to vet that with like the coordinator on site to see like, hey, native language, we got that right. And then if there's going to be other people, they typically either vet that themselves or they ship that off to their international contacts if they have folk coming in from other countries, and verify that it's aligned and looks good and right.
Okay, so your VA would search for somebody that would have a contact in the country, and then you'd send it off again to somebody in the country to review.
Yeah,
So
one
that
of
was
the
your
hosts.
quality.
Yeah, one of the hosts for the event like to vet that information in advance. Yep.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that's how you're doing the quality
Yep.
control. Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel by any means. So, and I try
yeah,
to keep it very simple. It's really thought provoking, and let's get your ideas, your answers to these things. So they're not typically long and detailed, and they also get to work alongside with me explaining it as, a front man in that. So I found it to be very successful as far as just engagement and learning.
yeah. Oh, we've heard of so many companies where they're the ones that translated the information and ended up winning the deal or having more success because even though the presentation was in English, they had translated all their forms. So I'm glad to hear
Mm.
that. Yeah. And then, so on your document management, like if you go back to a different organization in Norway, or if you have it translated into Spanish and go to another Spanish speaking country, do you reuse them?
I
Or,
will. I will. Yeah, I keep all of it. Right. The nice thing about
okay.
computers today, right? Like have it all on file. But yeah, I will do it. But I'd still vet the same thing, even if if you did like if you did like Venezuela, and then I said like, oh, we're gonna go to Puerto Rico. There's a significant different dialect there, right? And of
Yeah.
course, if you went over to Madrid, very different. So
Yeah.
someone would say like, hey, we need to change this, make it
Yeah.
more really Spain Spanish, right? Because Dominican Spanish is very it's not a highly educated country, right? So it's very slangy,
Hmm.
and everybody wants that. Usually if you're going by the book, in proper grammatic fashion, kind of keeping it safe, right? I'm not saying, the King's English here when we talk about English language, but, when you use your proper grammar, proper etiquette, from a more professional and, less slang, right? Like
More grammatically correct.
grammatically correct. That's what I'm looking for, right? If you just
Yeah.
kind of keep it to that, and also keep it simple, not using words that extraneous, and always
Yeah.
trying to look more educated, and forget that. Like keep it. We're back to the KISS principle, right?
Yeah. Keep
Let's
it simple. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, and it's true. And that's with Spanish, we see a lot. You can use a global Spanish that will do a good job with communicating. There are certain, like if it's a consumer, if it's a football for a certain country, you're going to have to localize. But Mexico, Puerto Rico, they're very anglicized, so they'd be different. If there's any Spanish in the United States, particularly on healthcare or government or stuff like that, you have to, there's a specific Spanish. But
Yes.
you're right. If you use a good, grammatically correct for leadership training, you probably can do one translation.
Yeah, and I don't mind. Like, I'm open to the fact, like, hey, we'd love to see this change to this. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine. Like, no problem for me. Like, and like you said, Panama, like, you get different countries and it's fine, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so exciting that you're doing it all over the place and working with interpreters and yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I like, I don't know how easy it is for them. I don't get a lot of feedback from the interpreters, right? Like, the audience always gives feedback. I would like to have some feedback from the interpreters, like, hey, could you slow down? Did you use enough pauses? Did we have enough breaks? What was the temperature? And so, by different cultures, I have seen um, where I'll have a lot of different countries represented,
Yeah.
and there'll be, like, let's say 250 people in the room and 10 countries, and like two countries kind of rate you badly. like, oh, well, everyone had you at 9.5 average, and these two tables were kind of like 7.
Oh,
And I'm like, oh, which two countries? Like, oh, well, India. And I'm like, oh, because we're in Asia, but India's very different from some of the Chinese and the Japanese cultures, right? And so it's a
so you
struggle.
don't know if it was a cultural thing or whether it was a
Yeah,
language through the interpreter.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of challenges in it. So yeah, it could be like, oh, what if I got marked because I had a bad interpreter? Like, I wouldn't know
Ouch.
that. I wouldn't know
Yeah.
that. And so, but I've never received a feedback form and said, hey, here's the audience and here's the interpreters. Like, that would be really interesting to me, because I think I could learn a lot from that.
Yes, you could. And the other way to do it is we'll often suggest this to people who are going to use interpreters, is that before you start the conference, meet with the interpreters and pick up some
Hmm.
hand signals. So every so often you look at them or check in with them at the break, which is hard because you have people from the audience coming up to talk to you, but allow that time to touch base with them so you can get the feedback live rather than at the end.
So
And
good.
then
Yeah.
they can also be a cultural conduit where they give you suggestions on what might be appropriate or inappropriate, or the audience isn't getting because you're
Yes.
talking
Yeah.
about pickleball and they don't know what it is.
Yeah. Love pickleball. You know it.
I
That's so
played
good.
pickleball for the first time last weekend. I loved it.
Did you? It's so good. It's so
Yeah,
much fun.
it
Yeah,
is.
I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I've been playing the last few years, but I think I think that's a really good point. I know that, unintentionally, of course, I have said things in the past that have, like, hey, by the way, you likely just offended 20% of the audience when you said, and I was like, ooh,
Do you
like,
remember what it was that you said?
no, not off the top of my head. Maybe because it's happened so often. No, just kidding.
Or it hasn't happened very often, but
No, I've been more cautious over the last few years.
yeah.
But I can remember telling a story where I was saying something about, and I made a hand gesture to what happened, right? And they
Yeah.
were like, "Whoa, that means something else here, right?" Like,
Yeah, no thumbs up, no okay
yes.
signals. If you watch politicians, their thumbs always tucked in, not like a fist, but it's tucked in for them to make the points. You got to be careful
Oh,
with
so it's here, like, it's that.
it's the fist with the thumb tucked in.
Oh,
So if you
okay.
ever watch politicians speak, it's kind of
Mm,
like they're
mm, mm.
hammering almost.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
got
that's a good
it.
safe hand gesture. But
Yeah. You
the
don't say that. Number one. Yeah, I've been number one. Like, yeah. Japan, I guess that means something very different. And yeah.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
then the
So
way, like,
I've
if
had
you
to
want
watch
to,
that. I know I've been guilty of the hand gestures in the past.
yeah, and so that's a good thing to ask your interpreters too before you present. Is there any I tend to do number one. Is there anything offensive about that I should know? Or, yeah, it's very interesting. Or where you touch people too,
Mm.
and
Yeah,
just
now it's so different, like, it's so different. Like, and COVID's probably part to do, but it's so much changed, because American hugging is customary, right? Like, it's
yeah,
very, like, we're, a warm people, and we like contact, and it's
yeah,
changing. It's really changing. And it's tough. It's tough. It's
yeah.
tough for a person like me because I don't like that change. think we,
No, I don't either. I'm a hugger, and that I did not realize how much I would miss hugs.
yeah,
I'm
right.
shocked.
Yeah, and now it's not only feels like kind of impersonal because we've lost our customary, hey, it's really nice to see you. But
Yeah,
now there's another level of like, well, I'm offended because you hugged me in the wrong way and your hands were here. Like, wait, what? Like, wow, and it's
yeah.
like, man, it's so much. It just feels like it feels really kind of ominous, right? And so it's hard. It's hard now.
Well, it's
It's a change
also,
I don't like.
I mean, you've been to France before, right? And you do the
Yeah.
French kiss, not the French kiss, but the
Yeah.
French greeting kiss,
Oh yeah. Oh right.
where it's one cheek to cheek kiss if you kind of know them, it's two if you know them better, and it's three if you really know them.
Right. Right.
And
I know.
there's some subtlety you got to figure out there that I
Right.
have yet to figure out. I'm always looking for the lead of how many times we're going to cheek
Yeah.
kiss.
Are we gonna keep going? Because like, oh, you're coming back in for a third? Wait a minute. Do we know each other that well? Like, yeah, I know. It's, yeah, it's cool though. It's cool that countries have their own
Yeah,
customs, right? It's
yeah.
cool that they have their own thing. And I think we have to lighten up a little bit and roll with it. Like, guess what? It's okay if you muck it up. Like you're an American. You always like the language. I mean, the language you've always heard the joke, right? The hey, if I speak 3 languages, I'm trilingual. If I speak 2 languages, I'm bilingual. If you speak 1 language, you're American. That's me, right? So it's like,
Well, I just heard
uh,
statistics. It's like like 2/3 of the other people in other countries are, multilingual or bilingual. And here in the United States, it's like a quarter. I mean, it's dramatically different.
this is where I get my humility. If any time for a moment, I'm not a big dude, right? Like I'm like 5'6", 165 pounds, right? So I don't ever have to worry about like physically being this big presence. But whenever I feel like I'm getting a little too big for my britches, just get on a business class flight anywhere internationally, and I constantly feel instantly like I'm unintelligent and uneducated because
Yeah.
I talk to people like, oh well, I'm from Holland, but I speak 7 languages.
And I can tell you more about your political system and history than I can.
Oh, listen, I go right there. Listen, every time I'm in Canada or anywhere international, I'm like, who should I vote for? Like, I go, oh well, let me tell you what Joe Biden stands for. Let me tell you, like, oh, okay. It's educational for sure because they know so much more about our
They
system.
do, and that's Americans take such the bust on. If an American comes to your country, they'll know nothing about who your leaders are or what your how
Yeah,
you
and I think
function.
I think that's something that, yeah, unfortunately, I think it is changing though, because again, small world, like what does it really take you to spend an hour on Wikipedia and
Right.
Google and find some things out?
Yeah.
You're going to Kazakhstan. Like, why don't you find out a little bit of that history and find out about some things that are going on and the people and it's interesting. And when you start, I mean, I know like anytime I go near the mountains, like I'm always like, hey, do you guys have Sherpas? Like, I want to know, like, anyone who lives up at that altitude and, then like Peru, I'm like, oh, so I'm like fascinated, right? So, and it doesn't take much to learn. And I think people are remiss if you go into Ecuador and don't go to Mita del Mundo. You're in the middle of the world. Like, this is
Yeah.
where we all connect. And I have this great photo of my son. I took him down there on a mission trip, and he was
Oh,
10.
fun.
And so we're standing, in the 4 corners, right? We are 2 different hemispheres, of course, right? And we're separating east and west, right? So we have like the 4 corners, and we think we're so cool, right? Like, hey, we're
Oh,
in the middle of
that
the
is so cool. I need to go there. That's
yeah.
on my bucket list now. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny, like you talk about, like, I don't want to give the French a bad name, but there was these great, brilliant mathematicians who come in and they did it, and they, back in, this is
Yeah.
umpteen hundreds of years ago, right? And they do
Yeah.
all these calculations well, it turns out like they're 26 feet off, right? And I'm like, the calculation was done like 1,400 years ago. Like, are you
With
serious?
no computers, no
I don't
calculators,
think
no.
they had a protractor, bro. Like, and it's like, it's just like 26 feet, and they take heat. Like, like, well, it's not exactly the middle of the night. Oh my gosh, it's good. Like, I'm good with it. Like, I'm just gonna go stand over here at the monument.
I will still celebrate their spot because they did it so long ago. Yeah.
And I think it's such a great word. We celebrate people. That's the international market, like celebration, like, and they're celebrating, what America stands for, and people really do appreciate that, and they do celebrate their cultures, and it's so cool. And why wouldn't we do that? And by the way, nothing builds relation better than celebration, right?
Right. Yeah.
So let's do more of that and smile more. Like, let's have more of that and less of what we have today, for sure.
Yeah. All right, then I'm going to switch us over to some personal stuff. I'm sure you'll give us some smiles. All right, your favorite vacation?
Ooh, my favorite vacation. Good one. Wow. Is it for me or my family? Like place to go to, or what are we talking about?
Whatever, however you define favorite vacation. It could be a solo, it could be family. It's no offense to anybody. It was just a big memory.
Yeah. So family vacation for me is going to the mountains with the kids. Like, I think that's always been my number one. Like, go into, it's kind of God's country. Like, you see things, we live in the Midwest, right? It's pretty flat. So the mountains and just the majesty of that, right? And then as you get in there and you just realize, like, the world's different and the topography is different. And we're usually, skiing or snowboarding. And so I like that. I spend, I get on a chairlift with one of my kids for, 10 minutes and just talk about stuff and the world. And we get scared because, you're 200 feet off the ground in places going, do not fall off.
Don't drop a pole, don't drop a ski or a glove.
Fear. And I really like to go anywhere with my kids where we learn something new. And there's always stuff to learn, right?
Yeah.
So Vancouver for me is probably one of the most beautiful places in the world. I tell everybody who will listen, and that's not that many to me, but
right.
Vancouver, it is wow. I mean, the Rockies meet the Pacific. It's just with Whistler there. I mean, within kind of 110-mile radius, it's just unbelievable. Victoria Island.
I have to get there.
It is. Okay. It is fabulous.
How about your most rewarding business cross-cultural experience?
For sure, professional baseball, right? Like you go across, when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Like let's take 25 men from 10 different countries, multiple, cultures, and we have a goal to come together as a team, work really well with this international game, and not only be kind of successful, but really be better than everybody else in the world, right? And so when you win that kind of, that world championship, right? It's pretty incredible. And it's also a great learning experience and it takes some tolerance for other people, but it also, you need some grace from other people too, because you're going to kind of muck it up. You're going to say things to people that may hurt their feelings and you don't know it. And so it's not easy. It's a thick-skinned environment, and so it's really kind of special. But wow, but when it all comes together, you realize that's where I think humanity really comes together. When it really all comes together, you realize that, like, what's important is your values, right? Mm-hmm. And what you need to be successful. And at the end of the day, purple, green, whatever, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who your parents were. It doesn't matter, what country you lived in. It doesn't matter what language you speak. It's really about the heart, right? And so it's pretty special when it all comes together, and it's hard. It's hard work. And I think that's what makes it more special because, we value the stuff we worked hard for. Like,
right.
You went and got your master's degree, did all this stuff, and you're like, man, raising a kid and trying to get my master's. Like, but when you get it, hey, earned.
You have just picked the two hardest things and most fulfilling things in my life.
Right?
Getting my MBA from Dartmouth and raising my kids. Hands down, hardest thing, most rewarding.
And earned, not given.
Yeah.
Not given.
No.
You know, and I love that. I saw, you know, someone said that on a show I was watching. They said, you know, how about the rings? And he goes, and he's kind of given like answers. He goes, earned, not given.
Earned.
You know,
yeah.
and I'm like, you know, MBA from Dartmouth, that's earned. That's not given. You know, world championship ring, that's earned.
It's earned.
It's not given.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, hey, why don't we go out this weekend and by the end of the weekend we should be the world pickleball champions? Like, no. Like, earned. You know, if you want that, hey, let's go for that. But like, that is going to be a multi-year process, right?
Yes.
And for me, it's going to be another age category that hopefully I can stay. You know, I can be a world champion when I'm 60. You know? So
Well, back in my
22.
20s, I said I can either age 20 years and keep this time and be a winner, or I can drop 20 minutes off my triathlon time.
Mhm.
I've got the age now, but I don't have the 20 minutes off the time.
Right? Yeah. It's a balance. It's a balance.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on today. It's been so refreshing talking to you. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Leadershipity. I'm on Twitter at the same. LinkedIn is probably my most popular. People find me on LinkedIn. I think, you know, I'm a relations guy, and I like people to know a little background. A lot of people reach out to me through that.
Okay,
Always
so they
happy.
can just Google or go to LinkedIn and look for Trent Clark, Leadershipity,
Yep.
and they'll find you on LinkedIn.
They will find me pretty quick. Fortunately, there's not a lot of Trent Clarks out there, which is really nice.
Oh, that's
Obviously, leadershipity.com is our website. So.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, I love learning. You know, you said it really well, that throughout the world there are a lot of difference, but we share so much. We share music, sports. We share celebrating, laughter, relationships, smiles, values, and coming from the heart. So,
Family.
And family, the value of family. Yeah. So thank you so much for reminding us all on that. And thank you, listeners, for listening. If you learned something today or you had a laugh, tell somebody about the podcast. You can find it on all your favorite places to listen, and we'll talk to you next time. That's a wrap for this session. A big thanks to you for listening to the Global Marketing Show. Hope you had just as much fun as I did. New sessions launch weekly on all places you find podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and of course on our website. If you know someone interested in this topic, please tell them about us. Au revoir for now.